Welcome to the Real Estate Espresso Podcast, your morning shot of what's new in the world of real estate investing. I'm your host, Victor Menasce. This is the weekend edition. We have a very special show for you today. We have a great guest. He's a repeat guest. He's none other than Mr. George Ross. On today's show, we're talking about negotiation, and specifically the importance of demonstrating flexibility in negotiation. George is a master when it comes to negotiation, having taught at the law school at NYU for over 20 years. Listen to my conversation with George Ross. Good evening, George.
Hi, Victor. How you doing?
I'm very well.
So pretty formal tonight. The jacket is sure. I'm impressed.
Been in Zoom meetings all day with investors and various things.
Investors are always good.
I have your book open on my desk here. We're actually deep in negotiation right now. One of the questions for tonight on our Colorado Springs project.
Great. Good. That's a good project there. That should be a real, winner. But long period of time. Don't rush it.
Yeah, it's a legacy project for sure.
Yeah, but it's good. It's good. It's got many variables to it, which is wonderful. It's not tied to one particular project, one particular type of property, one type of investment. It's plenty of land. It's got everything going for it.
Yeah. So, George, let's start with something that is straight out of your book. I have it open on my desk, not just for tonight's call, but also because we're actually even ourselves deep in a negotiation, and we'll get to that a little bit later in tonight's proceedings. But let's start with something that is straight out of your book. You talk about using flexibility as a strategic tool, where often when we think about being flexible in a negotiation, that could be seen as a sign of weakness. And there's a bit of a nuanced approach here in terms of when and how to be flexible and to use that, in fact, to come from a position of strength.
Well, yeah, but I think you reason wrong. I don't never talk about being flexible as much as being open to additional ideas, which might make a better deal or make the deal work. So it's just sometimes you can substitute something for something else. So you can substitute money for time. You can substitute time for money. You can substitute people for not having the same people. So it's keeping an open mind. I think that if that's what you're talking about, or I was referring to being flexible, keep an open mind that everybody has, in doing a transaction, has some weakness or something that they will respond to. So what I was trying to get across is that's what you have to work on. That's what they respond to. Maybe they have an emotional situation. Maybe it's a question of dollars. Maybe it's a question of time. Find out what the basis of their need is, and use that as a lever to get the best transaction you can.
Okay, that makes sense. I mean, oftentimes we see something written in a document and you read the words in black and white, but don't necessarily understand the intent behind that language. And
that's even worse now that you have the calls. In other words, you have emails.
Right.
Because you can't read behind an email. So, for example, you right back said, that's a great idea. Maybe they say that they're criticizing, and they say that really say that's a great idea. You don't get the inference, the intonations. You look at the words. You read them the way you want to read them, not necessarily the way the person that wrote them wanted them read.
Absolutely.
It can be very misleading.
So, can you give an example? Maybe just can help unpack this a little bit more.
Everyone that's involved in a transaction has some motivation. If you understand what the motivation is, you can relate to it. Some people, it's more important that they have a lot of money. Others that they have prestige. Others that they have time. So it's a question of going what makes the deal work for them. In other words, if I very often had somebody submitted a transaction, and I say, "Why do you want to sell it now?" All right, now we're not. When I say, "Why do you want to sell it?" We're not talking price. We haven't got to that. But I want to hear what they say. And then I can ask more questions. Why would you do it now? And it ties into some say, well, hey, the loan market is bad. Why would you want to get involved now? I want to hear the answer. I don't have to believe you. I want to hear what they say.
Mm-hmm.
what they think. Sometimes they think it's a good time to invest. It's not a bad. So it's what I'm saying is in the flexibility, what have you, that you have to do basically delve into the other person's psyche or the one of to find out what they are really interested in, and then use that subtly for the best way to make a deal.
If you're, and we often run into this right now. In fact, I can think of, 3 or 4 different projects where there's a political element. There's
Yeah, oh yeah, and that's it. Was a political. You have to find who's the politics that's involved.
Right.
What would you like, especially when you're dealing with politicians? Some just want to basically they want to look good. They want to come across with as being a savior to their constituents or a fertile mind, whatever. And you have to be aware of that. Very often, it has nothing to do with whether or not it's a good deal or a bad deal. It's how that appears to the general public.
Right. We often, for example, in fact, we're going through one right now where there's actually a city council meeting going on in parallel with this meeting. And, one of our team members is out there literally counting votes. And we know that we've got 3 votes in our favor and there's 2 that are on the fence. And yet each one maybe has a different set of motivations.
Sure. That's all. Yeah. And you have to find out what the motivation is and get to it. How can you solve or help solve that situation? And very often, I would say very often, when we deal with politicians, it's the perception, not the reality. So it's how the deal is perceived by them, the general public, not necessarily whether it's a great deal. All right. And when it comes to politicians, most of them, I would say, or a great majority, don't really know a great deal. They're not business people; they're politicians. So it's a different world out there. But it's a necessary part of it. They control all kinds of questions, all kinds of answers, and what you can build, where you can build it, the time frame that's involved, how it's going. So it's different land that you're in, and it's constantly changing depending upon how it's viewed. Something can happen to change the motivation in an instant.
Mm-hmm.
Especially what's going on now with guns and schools and abortion. With there's so many things that are up in the air that could enter into a politician's decision to act in a certain manner.
So one of the things that you wrote about in the book is exploiting short-term financial thinking in others, where you were talking about oftentimes we might have different time horizons. Like we might be looking on a 5 or 10 year time horizon. The other party's looking on a much shorter time horizon.
Right. So then the question is, you have to find out what their time horizon is and why did they do it? So somebody says, well, I want to get this, I want to solve this property, I want to get rid of it in a year. And the question is, why? Why now? Why a year? I want to find out and then when I hear the answer, I will then question further based on the answer.
Mm-hmm.
How legitimate is the answer? So very often you'll find out that it's been the answer is given, but I don't believe it because it's given. I mean, I've had situations where say, unless this deal closes in 2 weeks, we have no deal. All right, now you believe no. So I say, well, it closes in 2 weeks. I'm going on vacation in 2 weeks, and I'll be out for another 2 weeks. Can it wait a month? What do they say? Yes. If they say yes, the 2 weeks was phony.
Right.
If they say no, and I say, well, why not? And they have to explain why they took that position. And very often you will find that the position they've taken is just thrown out there arbitrary to see how you will react to it when it's not truly something they need or they've really considered. They think it's a good negotiating ploy.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, when you're dealing with politicians, have you found, and I know there's no one answer, but in general, giving something to, let's say, the city that is going to be of universal value versus giving a campaign donation, have you any experience which is more effective?
One has much greater value than the other. The campaign contribution has less value than somebody getting their name on a building or being the benefactor for some worthwhile project which the city is going through. They like to have their name on it at that point, or they were the moving party. They got something done nobody else could get done, or they were. That's much more important to a politician necessarily than just a campaign donation. Campaign donations don't necessarily work. It depends on how much, whether or not your person is going to win, all right, and how they need the money, how they use the money. And I found that if I can deal with their personal motivations or their ego, it's better in the ultimate results than dealing with the making a contribution. Now, but subtly, there's nothing wrong with saying, yeah, I can help you out. Do you need money? But whatever it is. But that should not be the moving factor.
Okay. Makes sense. Makes sense. That's actually very valuable. That's very valuable, and something that frankly we'll put into practice almost immediately after this call.
Good.
Fantastic.
Good. And maybe you can throw something out. Could you throw out of left field? A great idea. No one considered it. Like this, a playground for children, a playground for children that have disabilities. That's almost a uniform acceptance or something. Everybody wants to help sick kids. Everybody wants to help underprivileged people. So now, if you throw out something along the lines, then they become a public benefactor, not necessarily a private benefactor themselves. So it's public, which very often can be the motivating factor to get it done if you throw it out properly and you give them some kind of a broad idea, big idea that they might not have considered.
I love my conversation with George. I put his advice to work immediately in the days following our conversation, part of our negotiation in closing the deal on the Norris Ranch property in Colorado Springs. He's truly a master when it comes to negotiation. I truly value and cherish the time we have together. At 94 years of age, one of the wisest men I know, I'm so blessed to have George in my life. Now, if you don't have a George in your life, ask yourself how you can find a George in your life. It doesn't have to be George Ross, but there's many experienced, wise people that can help you. As you think about that, have an awesome rest of your day. Go make some great things happen. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.